Real Country 1430 AM and 1073 FM WRDN. This is the WRDN Morning Farm Report. I'm Brian Wantoch, and joining us today is Katie Wantoch. She's Ag Extension Agent with Dunn County Extension. Talk a little bit about the harvest, and thank you to our newsmaker sponsors, including Compeer Financial, Animal Wellness Center of Buffalo Valley, Annabis Silo, Osteoplastics, Synergy Co-op, A&J Agronomy, Wisconsin Farmers Union, and Elsivia Co-op. Joining us right now, again, Katie Wantoch. And Katie, thanks for joining us. While the harvest in Dunn County, especially in the northern part of the county, that's pretty much wrapped up, right?
Yeah, it's getting there. I would say, a good 75-80% of the farmers have got, for sure soybeans mostly done, few kind of fields out there maybe hanging on, but they kind of had to switch to corn because soybeans were a little high moisture there at the start, but now they've gone back. I think soybeans are mostly done, and I'd say at least almost 75% of corn is harvested here throughout Dunn County from what I'm hearing. So, which is good news.
From the producers you talked with, what were yields looking like?
Look, yields are surprisingly above average. I think farmers are pleasantly surprised. We had a little dry spot, coming through there, but then we got the moisture right when we needed it, right when it was pollinating, and the cobs were filling out. So I think that really did make a difference. And I think farmers are pleasantly surprised. I think moisture levels are coming in, 15-20%, something like that. And everything is going out well. So prices are still holding steady, and that's really great for farmers too.
Talking with Katie Wantoch, she's Ag Extension Agent with the Dunn County Extension. Katie, what about, at least we'll start with the corn side. We've heard reports of tar spots, especially in southern Wisconsin, but even now here in western Wisconsin. Did you get any of those reports in Dunn County?
It was real spotty. Anytime you have a disease, especially kind of the wet fall that we kind of were having, now we're running kind of in a dry spell again, but there's always a concern out there whether you need some fungicide or not. And really now it's trying to plan as you harvest, really look at what can you do to prepare that field for next year. Make sure that disease is still not lingering out there. What kind of anything that you might be looking at. Sometimes cover crops might help, not necessarily on the disease side, but, really working with your agronomist and your team to plan for next spring.
For soybeans, white mold and SDS, did you have reports of those? I know we've had that in the past.
Not this year. We heard soybeans, occasional spots. I saw black spots out in fields, before harvest, but really not. So I think that also was a bright spot for soybeans.
Was that with the white, especially with the white mold, because that sticks around? So was it because of our dry weather that we had? We didn't have so much rain that it kept everything, conducive for white mold, where in effect, yeah, we got the rain when we needed it, but it didn't, have everything so wet in there that it would cause white mold.
It really looks at, field and rotating fields, that kind of breaks up that cycle too of any type of disease that's out there. But also, looking at your planter width, of your rows, and, how can that make sure you got a good aeration down into your plants and making sure those diseases are out there. So really taking a good look over the winter and seeing what, works best.
Talking with Katie Wantoch, Dunn County Ag Extension Agent, as we talk about, as we get ready for the 2022 planting season. And obviously there's a lot of concern about prices for inputs, fertilizer, chemicals, the whole deal, but especially with fertilizer. Is that one of the biggest things that farmers, if they haven't done so already, they need to do, and that is do some soil testing right now?
Yeah, definitely. Soil testing is good any time of year, but especially in fall as you go in, seeing what you need. But yes, unfortunately, crop input prices, just because of supply issues, really becoming a challenge. And the prices we've seen double, triple already. If you have not prepaid, and most time farmers right now are still trying to harvest. And so they're not really anticipating, planning for spring. But unfortunately, you really do need to pay attention to those crop input prices. And on the flip side, look at the markets for corn and soybeans for next year, and think about pre-contracting out some of those crops already, because if your inputs are going to be high, you're going to want to get the best price possible on that corn for your 2022 crop.
And do farmers, should they also then be, while looking at those prices, maybe making decisions on maybe adjusting crop rotations because of what they're seeing?
I think it's a little premature on that, but if crop input prices really do affect, then yes, farmers might want to consider adjusting their rotation. Now, again, we just had that conversation about disease. And so rotating crops, of course, really reduces that disease carryover into the next year. But, if crop inputs are to a point where that, does affect your price and your profits in the end, really looking at each crop, each enterprise budget that you have and trying to figure out what is most profitable for your operation and then going forward with that choice.
Talking with Katie Wantoch, she's Dunn County Ag Extension Agent this morning about the harvest. Katie, I know this isn't a big crop, at least like it used to be here in Western Wisconsin and really Wisconsin in general, but it's coming back, and that's wheat. Did you see were you able to talk to some wheat producers in Dunn County and find out about their harvest?
I don't know much about wheat, but I do know, at least in Dunn County, there is an increase in, for example, kidney beans, maybe just a few more acres of potato. Potato had a really great production year this past year, of course, dry weather, but they did have the irrigation a lot on those fields. So, I think a lot of farmers are just trying to experiment with some additional, crops in their rotation, trying to spread out, again, that disease, and just see, what makes sense for them, whether it's wheat, kidney beans, potatoes, some farmers are renting out for more horseradish too. So, it just makes sense, depending on what is in your rotation, what, can shake things up a little bit. But in the end, I always encourage farmers to look at what's profitable and making sure that that's your best choice.
And while those, those different crops potentially could be profitable, if I'm a primarily the traditional corn, soybean, alfalfa person, let's say, and okay, I'm looking at this going, oh man, maybe I should look at something different potentially, i.e. a wheat, or even a kidney beans or horseradish. There's other things though that I'm going to have to kind of, not only the profitability, but other things I may have to look into before I say I'm going to do horseradish, for example, because that might be a little bit longer and I may need some other equipment, and there might be other things I may not be familiar with, right?
Right. Even if you go into food grade vegetables, for example, or food grade beans, there's different harvesting techniques. There's different application of chemical and fertilizer that are required for those different crops. So it's really working with the end user, whoever's buying that product. And so that does take a lot more legwork on the farmer to make sure that they're abiding by the rules for the crop, especially, to make sure it's a product that's good for sale. So it does take more work, and those are the farmers that, are penciling out their numbers here over winter, make sure that that makes sense for them. But there are some profits, and that's kind of where we're seeing in those more specialty type crops.
Katie, finally, I know some of the events you don't have a lot of familiarity with, but we're getting into winter time, which means it's time for you to start the UW Extension Road Tour with all kinds of different events. A lot of events being planned here for this coming winter.
Yeah, definitely. We're trying to do some in person. We still have some restrictions, of course, on the capacity of meetings, but I know pesticide applicator training is one of those that we have not done for the past 2 or 3 years just because of the pandemic. And so that is one that for sure farmers are going to want to be interested in. With some of the upcoming extension changes, we won't be offering some of those pesticide trainings as often in the future. But we are, of course, really pushing forward with our webinars, series that we've done here these past 2 winters, and those are recorded. So as farmers get signed up, they can always watch them later on. And so we've got some good ones coming up, especially on farm management, but also on dairy and the crop series as well. So kind of a touch and go at least, but I do know our Ag Lenders Conference is scheduled for January, and that's primarily for ag lenders that, and any consultants that work with farmers to really get up on the crop input prices and other prices as well. So.
And for those webinars, it's pretty simple. They can just farmers can just go to the UW Extension website, and they're going to be able to find that list of what's there and the past ones, right?
Yeah, even if they go to their search engine and just type in UW extension farm ready research webinar series is what it is, and they'll all be listed there. So we are pushing forward. We're hoping to have more in person to kind of offset some of those webinar series, but we'll see how the winter and the pandemic progresses.
Katie Wantoch, she's Dunn County Ag Extension Agent. You're listening to the WRDN Morning Farm Report.